guitar. And horns? What production value do I have, right? It's like a whole horn section. There's like 12 guys with horns. That's a lot of horns. Can't doubt those horns. Here comes a guitar solo. Ready? A lot happening here. Twitch has never heard this kind of great guitar before. Don't worry, there's video coming. All right, break. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Dollar Box Reads. I am world-renowned stage and film actor Hume Cronin.
Go JT, go JT, go!
I'm kidding. My name's Jason Tudor, and I'd like to welcome you to the show. If you're not familiar with the show, well, then, it's time to get started. Basically, what we do each week is we find 3 comic books that we want to review, and now we're going to switch over to video. And there I am. Hi there. How are you, everybody? And welcome to Twitch. This is my first time broadcasting. If you're not familiar with the broadcast, what we do is we pick out 3 comics from the dollar box, one of which is right over there. And comics I bought for like $1 or $2, or some comics that aren't worthy, and we review those. And I've been a little sluggish on that lately, and admittedly so. But I'm getting back to that this week, so that will be toward the end of the show. Well, we got a lot going on this show, including a interview with fantasy writer Rosaire Bushey. He publishes a series of books under the label The 30 Stones. And Magic's Genesis. If you haven't gotten them, you should. They are fantastic pieces of writing by a guy who is a great dude, and you'll want to get them, and you'll love the interview that's coming up here in about 20 or so minutes, plus a few other topics that we usually try to get into on the show. And I'm excited to have you along. This is my first broadcast on Twitch. I have no idea how this is going to go. But I usually try to do this part of the show live and then record it for audio and then send it over to iTunes. So let's see what happens. Smile, and then we'll figure it out. This broadcast is in part brought to you by the publishing juggernaut Crazy Monkey Inc., who invites you to join their whole line of comics, including my very own comics, which you can see, right over there? No, right over there. The Vorpal, which is my comic about my little assassin who's on the run from everything and everybody. And you can pick her up there, but you can also pick up 5 Star and Darum and Taxi Cab Joe and some other fantastic titles. Right now, 5 Star has got a Kickstarter that they are very close to completing, so I hope you'll take some time to head over to Kickstarter, type in 5 Star, and give my friend Tony Clapper a bit of money. But CMI and Crazy Monkey Inc. are doing a great job as independent comic publishers and getting the word out there about great independent comic books, including our own, and just being part of that whole independent comic book community. If you want to pick up your copy of Vorpal, I am tired. I'll get to that in a minute. If you want to pick up a copy of Vorpal, you can go to the address that's seen on the screen below. I can do that. indieplanet.us/Vorpal, and both of the current issues are there. The 3rd issue is going out for beta reads on Monday. If you'd like to do that, you can get in touch with me by message on Facebook, or you can reach me at info@jasontudor.com. I'd love to have you along as a beta reader, and happy to have you. But again, info@jasontudor.com, or hit me up on Facebook if you know me, or through my Facebook page. Again, Crazy Monkey Inc. is available through Facebook. There's a store there, and they're also on Instagram, so you can check them out on both of those venues. Great folks, great comics, and lots of great stories to tell. Again, I emphasize, go pick up your copy of Vorpal if you haven't, 1 and 2. I sense there's going to be a free e-weekend for Vorpal coming up. I sense that will be around Thanksgiving. I'll have more on that on a future show. All right, shilling aside, welcome to Dollar Box Reads again for this week. So much to talk to you about. Again, this is my first plunge onto Twitch, which is not only a video game broadcasting forum, but they also do a lot of podcasts and things like that. So that's why I decided to give this a shot. I see Chris Etter is online. Listen, free plug for Chris Etter Design. He does amazing stuff. He did Rosaire Bushey's logo, and he's doing some amazing things. Check Chris out online. You can find him pretty easily. Chris Etter designs.com, I think. He'll correct me on that in the chat room if not. But check out Chris's work. Great to see some folks here in the chat room in the Twitch chat room as well. And if you're listening on audio on Apple from iTunes or from the podcast there, I'm sorry, but the live experience is happening right here, right now. Anyway, I'm tired. It's been a long week. I got sick a couple days this week. Haven't had a lot of great sleep. We took a big trip last weekend. I slept in a room that was about the size of a shoebox, and unfortunately, I just slept on a bed that was either made of plywood or hell. It was made of actually a fragment of hell, and that was my own fault because I elected to do that. ChrisEtterDesign.com, by the way. And it didn't work out, so I've had this horrible carryover since Sunday or Monday from getting out of that hotel room. And unfortunately, I haven't caught up on my sleep yet. So if I shoot some stuff bad this week, that's probably why it is. Not dementia, not yet. But anyway, it was a great trip. But I've got to sleep in tomorrow, or otherwise it's going to be a long day to go. So one of the things I decided to do when I came back from the trip was I wanted to try out some video games. I had a bit of a gaming Jones. I got Destiny 2 for a really low price. I'm going to play that soon. I've got another fantasy game I've got on my Xbox over there, but I was looking through the Steam catalog, and I was wondering, is the game City of Heroes still available? And it's not. You can't play it online anymore, although I think there's like a pirate server out there you still can play. But I'd forgotten there was a game called Champions Online that followed City of Heroes. City of Heroes went through its metamorphosis, and then it morphed into Champions Online because of licensing and some other things. And they actually took the role-playing pieces and rules from Champions Online, the game, which was a great RPG. I really enjoyed playing that the one or two times I played that. They took that and they morphed it out of that and into the video game. So I thought, oh, cool, I will go check this out again, see if I'm into it, but and load it up. So I loaded it up. I was excited to play it, especially with my strained internet connection here in the house. Lo and behold, I get the whole game loaded, and, well, man, you just cannot go home again. You can't do it. You cannot go home again. Those graphics were like, ooh, yeah, like the Peter with the knee. Ah, ooh, yeah, they weren't great at all. I played it for about 5 minutes, and the character creations tool is still pretty amazing, but I couldn't stick it out for the whole time, and I had to stop. So I've got some games on Xbox I'm going to be retreating to soon. And I'm looking forward to sitting down this weekend after I help clean the house and do a few other things and doing those. One of the things I thought interesting this week was hearing about how Kevin Feige was not only taking over, he does Marvel films, but he was also taking over Marvel TV, which I thought made sense since that brand is trying to sort of keep continuity and the new trends as it started with Star Wars was canon throughout all the different products from comics to film to webisodes to video games. And the thing I didn't realize was that Kevin Feige is also taking over Marvel Comics. And so there was a great video piece today that I didn't get to finish by a writer, Mike Barron, who's been a guest of this show and another show. He's always been pretty gracious and about doling out knowledge and spending a few minutes. He's a cantankerous dude. He came on and he was the one who posted it, but I think it was by Chuck Dixon, I think. Anyway, he was sort of going over the different scenarios that could occur as far as what could happen to Marvel Comics with a Kevin Feige takeover. And he said there were 4. Unfortunately, I only got through 2.5, and the first 2 were not good. But on a broader sense, I wonder, was nobody really expecting this? Was nobody really expecting that the footprint of the movies would become more of what the comic books looked like? Dixon was quick to point out a lot of different things as far as the comics go. Specifically, comics aren't selling right now. Comics are having a very hard time. He went on to give his opinion about how varied comics are. Thor is a woman, this, that, and the other thing. And he didn't seem to have anything about that. I don't have an opinion about that one way or the other. I'm not really keeping up with those comics right now. But he seemed concerned that comics were going in too many different directions and they were getting away from what people were seeing on the screen. And one corollary that he put out was, can a moviegoer go from the movie theater to a comic store, buy a Thor comic, and expect to see something that looks like Chris Hemsworth in the comic? And the answer right now is no. The Thor character right now is a woman. So the juxtaposition that he said is, well, there's only four things that can happen. One is that they basically allow it to go on as is right now, but that doesn't make any sense against the current movie and TV brand. The second was to sort of make the comics conform to the movie brand, but then that's going to have insurrection from the editors and the writers and the artists and all the other things. The third thing was something else, which I think started out to be something like freely contracted out to people. Let them make their own, let Marvel sort of contract out these books to folks, to professional artists and writers and things like that, versus sort of having a stable of in-studio stuff and let them create based on sort of the Feige plan. Feige kind of saying, okay, this is the canon. This is like Leland Chi created for Star Wars. This is the book, and this is the Necronomicon that you have to go by. And, that's it. And I didn't get to the fourth thing. Here's the bigger point that I wanted to make. The bigger point here is that if anyone wasn't expecting the big mouse Disney influence to filter down onto the comic books, I think that was naive. And I think now that is starting to happen to a great degree. My fear was that the comic books were going to end up looking like the movies. And the movie properties are still, of course, scattered across the winds. Although Marvel Disney did pick up a great bit of that by buying back Fox. Sony still owns Spider-Man, and you could go, as to how the pieces and parts are broken out. Of course, getting X-Men back and doing some of that really opens things up. But and it's not to say the movies aren't made with sophistication and care and love. I love so many of them. I love watching them. I love being part of that. It's that, I think, as I've said on the show before, the comic book experience to me is a wholly different, personal, solo, textural, contextual, mental experience than a film is. A film is different from a comic. I can't say it any other way, and it's not to slam one medium or another. It's that I prefer to get my comic book experience from comic books. And Marvel movies that take pieces and parts of comic book ideas, and the directors and writers and teams who put them in a movie certainly create something that is different and certainly worth watching. Marvel films, some of the DC films are fantastic, but they're not the comics. One of the comics I'll review later is a Spectacular Spider-Man, and it stars the villain Boomerang, and Boomerang's doing some weird shit with boomerangs, and I'll get to it, and it's just strange. But I couldn't experience that kind of strange on a film. It wouldn't fly. There are set criterion and milestones and things you have to do for general audiences who aren't niche audiences like me buying comic books, and it just doesn't fly. So it's important to make that distinction. But that said, if what Dixon said about comic books, Marvel comic books specifically, not selling is true, and that the sales are lagging and fragmented, and again, this may have just been one man's opinion coming from one particular angle on how he views the comic book industry. I've heard different stories that comic book sales are fine. I've heard different stories that say they're middling. He seems to think they're all tanking. Specifically Marvel, he seems to think Marvel is losing as a comic book company its ground as a leader. But how important is that now? Marvel's an entertainment juggernaut. Marvel Entertainment is what matters. Comics are part of that entertainment block. Film and TV come first. And I think comics are now a secondary thing, which is what I feared would happen when the takeover came. Comics wouldn't just stand on its own and sort of be its own. We would always have it. It would be there. It's going to be part of that mix. So that's a little bit frightening. It's an interesting opinion. It's interesting, again, to see how comics are going to be morphed in the next 3 to 5 years. If we are going to get back to what some on another side of the table have said is where there should be, as Dixon said, who's Captain America this week, who's Spider-Man this week, or are we going to continue to sort of diversify and take chances? I like both. I haven't read a lot of comics lately because a lot of the stuff hasn't interested me. And that's it. As I was telling somebody today, I'm not a big collector of things. I collect what I like, and I'm pretty quick about, I don't have to have all the Daredevil. I collect the Daredevils I like. I don't have to have all the Moon Knight. I get the Moon Knights I like, and so on and so forth. Yes, it is indeed. Comics do cost $5 a pop, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Printing costs, just the costs of hiring talent, things like that. But yeah, they're $5 a pop. So again, it's an interesting transition that Marvel's going through with this. The other story that caught my eye this week was sports, and you could see that I am wearing my Los Angeles Lakers hat if you're watching the live show, and if you're listening, I have on a Los Angeles Lakers hat because I've been a Lakers fan for quite a long time. And if you're familiar with everything that's happening in Hong Kong, of course, the NBA was playing in Hong Kong, and one of the general managers from the Houston Rockets said something to the effect of, we need to take care of the people of Hong Kong and support their cause and whatever else he said. I don't know the specific thing, but it was something in support of the protests versus the iron regime of China clamping down on the protests. And of course, the NBA is doing business with the nation of China and trying to get basketball established there, and it's billions and billions of dollars of business. So Morey's tweet essentially got Houston Rockets shit thrown out of stores. It got Houston Rockets stuff taken off of billboards. All that stuff is gone. And some other things. So of course, the argument's been waged all week. The NBA is a business. Was it right for Morey, a general manager, to say this and screw up the business? Should he have sort of kowtowed to what was going on and just kept his mouth shut? Whatever side of the fence you're on, if you're on the side of, look, I'm in business, I'm trying to do business in China, I'm trying to make a buck, and in order to do that, I have to follow their rules, as you would in the United States, as you would in Canada, as you would in Bratislava, wherever you go, you have to follow their business rules if you want to sell widgets in their country. So the NBA is trying to sell its widgets. Morey said something that did not go over well with the Chinese, and as a result, I think, again, all the merchandise was thrown on, and there were some things that happened. All right, so in steps LeBron, who basically says he could have waited a week to make his comments. And he didn't know by making his comments who that affected. And I thought it was a dumb comment, so just that up front. But I got it. I got that he was sort of saying, look, we're all in this NBA thing together. There's a lot of money at stake. Why would you say something like that? On the other hand, LeBron is getting killed on places like Reddit and Twitter, and some of the caricatures and cartoons are just hilarious for essentially siding with a totalitarian government. And, the most harsh parody that I saw was the Rosa Parks parody, basically saying, couldn't Rosa Parks have waited a week to get on that bus? There was a lot of things. I thought it was a dumb comment. I understand why he made the comment. I think he made a comment afterward to sort of try to walk it back. And, now he's being... he was the moral statesman for some time because he was funding schools and doing those things. But as the axiom was put forth, unless you try to get in the way of his money, when you try to get in the way of his money, all of a sudden, let's wait a week, or why would we say that, or something like that. I don't know where you fall on this. I don't like to do political stuff on this show. I like to make fun of things and, people when they're obvious, but I don't. My stance here is that it sounds like the NBA isn't sort of one voice going into its business operations, and probably should have been beforehand. I am, of course, for freedom. I am for open societies. I am for the sorts of things that the United States citizens and many, many countries all over the world have, that sort of freedom from oppression and those kinds of things. Great Britain gave back Hong Kong to China in, 99 or 2000, and China is supposed to abide by a governmental policy until the year 2047. Okay, if it chooses not to, what are the ramifications? Slap on the wrist? It belongs to them. There's a lot to this. And please don't take my pragmatism for cynicism. I am, of course, on the side of those who protest these laws and things trying to impede immigration and bring the hammer down on them. Of course I'm against all that. But looking at it from LeBron's point of view, I don't like it, but I understand it. So I suppose that's something to be said for that. So I mean, you take whatever side you want. You may not be a sports fan, and if you're listening to this show, as Chris Etter reminds me, do the Patriots play basketball? Chris is the most fervent Patriots fan ever. I got to get him. I'm just going to have him on the show so we can talk about design and yoga and stuff. You're going to love Chris. He's great. He was a broadcaster. He's great on the air. So we'll get him on sometime. But no, Chris, the Patriots don't play basketball. But you know that. You're a smart guy. Anyway, I told you a little bit. I'm tired. I'm run down. I think we're getting a cold too. I mean, is this? What do you think? Is it probably allergies maybe? But it's too late in the season for allergies. I don't know. I got to figure that one out. But anyway, it's the time marches on and all of that good stuff. So anyway, we've got some reviews coming up a little later in the show. 3 that I dug out of my dollar box. One is a real treat, and one definitely worth more than $1. One probably is worth $1, and the other one is up to you. And we've got a great rest of the show planned, but right now it's time for the weekly interview, and this week's interview is with my friend Ro Bushey. My guest this week on Dollar Box Reads is author and friend Rosaire Bushey. He has 3 books published and a 4th one coming under the 30 Stone Saga, under the heading of Magic's Genesis. The books are Magic's Genesis the Gray, Magic's Genesis Sword of Wilmenmen. Did I say that right?
Yes, close enough.
I keep wanting to say Wilmenmen or something, it's a tongue twister. Sword of Wilmenmen and Reckoning, and all 3 are available from Amazon.com as well as a number of places. He is a former military public affairs officer, and he is a communication manager at Virginia Tech, right, for the School of Engineering, if I read that correctly.
The Department of Mechanical Engineering.
I was close with engineering. I had that in my notes. I forgot the mechanical part. Anyway, he joins us on the podcast for the very first time, although I have joined him on his blog for a Q&A, which was absolutely too much fun. First question right out of the gate. Who's faster in cross country, you or your daughter?
Oh, right now, anybody's faster than me.
Well, yeah. But when you were a youth with all that hair blowing in the wind that I saw in the photo, I mean, were you gazelle-like, or what were you like?
I wouldn't say gazelle, but maybe some other small animal, maybe marmot.
Marmot. All right, well, that's fair. You do say in the post, admittedly, that your daughter is much faster than you were, by minutes even, right?
My son is much faster than me. My daughter is, she's a few years younger than him.
Yeah.
She will be much faster in a couple of years, I think.
All right. You also tried your first In-N-Out burger recently. What do you think of that?
It wasn't everything that everybody made it out to be. Mm-hmm. Everybody talked up such a good game about it. It's like the Cowboys. People always talk about it, how great they are, and then you try it. It's like, not so much.
Well, I mean, the Cowboys suck right now, so I mean, I wouldn't go comparing In-N-Out burgers to the Cowboys right now, but I guess I see your point. Even when I went back home a few months ago, I didn't get a chance to go to In-N-Out, so it's been a while since I've had one, so I'm going to have to take yours as a later reference. It's, what is it, entropy. Everything declines over time, so.
Yeah, it's just, there are people out there, I'm going to throw out a plug here. Chris Etter, chrisetterdesign.com.
Yes.
He's the guy that did my logo. He's a friend of mine, a Air Force journalist, broadcaster as well.
A friend of mine as well.
Just raves about In-N-Out Burger. My God. According to Chris, if you eat an In-N-Out Burger, you've just tasted a little slice of heaven.
Well, he's a fellow Californian. That's what we're supposed to say.
And I think that's probably it. So,
yeah.
Tell
us a little bit about, so you got a master's in English and you did this out of interest. What was the interest? What compelled you to suddenly say, you know what, I'm going to get a degree that will not make me any money, but I don't really need the money because I'm retired from the Air Force. But what was the interest here?
Well, I had some GI Bill money left over. So I already had a master's that I got back in 2004. And I had some GI Bill money left over and said, let's go get one for fun, right? So I found an English creative writing program. And I've had this book in my head for a really long time.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, if I can go over here in my bookcase, I can find some printed from I tried writing it years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
The program really kind of helped bring all the pieces together, all that stuff that you.
The master's program did, you mean?
Yeah, right.
So you sort of had these ideas floating around, and I'm guessing you probably even wrote some passages or even some chapters. What was it that the program cemented for you?
I think it really just helps kind of connect the dots in a way.
Okay.
As far as, getting your characters together and your plot points and your action sequences and all that kind of thing. It's probably a lot like doing a comic book in the fact that, you have to figure out where it's going to go to get to where you want it to be. Right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you found this too, Jason, this is work.
It's work. And I liked what you said on your blog about when you start getting into book 2, book 3, book 4, now you're having to connect dots and ensure that, things have continuity and that the sword makes sense. And the sword, which was a minor mention in one of your other books, is now a major plot point or a major device. And, oh, by the way, did I remember this person? I'm going actually exactly through that with Vorpal 4 in writing the last chapter of this thing and trying to get that right. But you said it pretty exquisitely on your blog. It's really just a matter of not only putting puzzle pieces together, but make sure the puzzle pieces are drawn the right way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that I really hate inconsistencies and continuity.
Yeah.
And so as I'm doing this, I try to look at it as a writer or someone watching a movie would look at it and how you're kind of drawn to those things. Like, oh, that's not what they do, or that's not how that works.
Right.
But then I find myself always kind of flipping through earlier books saying, okay, where did this person come from and what's the timeline like and what did they look like and what weapons did they have and all that kind of stuff.
And I'm guessing you were doing some of this at least while you were serving in the military and we were bumping around racing Humvees and things like that. What kinds of things were you doing to sort of keep your interest on that? I mean, were you a movie watcher? Were you a collector? Were you any of that? Or was it just sort of a tacit thing until until the master's program released the beast, so to speak?
I played in the comic book world in the early 90s like so many people did.
Yeah.
Keith Hewen and I were stationed together out at RAF Bentwaters in the early 90s, and he kind of got me on going with that.
Right.
And I kept that up for a little while, and then the wife said, there's too many white boxes in the house. You've heard that. The writing, though, I mean, I did enough writing at work where I really didn't do it too much at home. I think Amazon opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people.
It did,
right?
yeah. I can't agree with you about it. Yeah, incredibly much so.
So it's always that gatekeeper, right, where somebody didn't like your stuff and the time, right? I mean, even now, if you try to go to an agent or if you try to get a traditional publishing thing done, you're looking at from the time you submit it to the time maybe they print it is probably a year or more.
If not more, right. Because they're saying, okay, yeah, here you can submit it for fall of 19, but you're not going to see your book until winter of 20.
Right. And then if it doesn't sell well, you don't own the rights to it anymore.
Yeah.
And you have to wait until those rights expire before you can get it back and do anything with it. I think the Amazon and a lot of other places, not just them, have opened up some possibilities for people who are willing to do the work, and there's so much of it.
Right.
And also, I've talked to people who do have agents, and there's the traditional publishing route. They still want you to do a lot of the things that you have to do as an independent publisher anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They still want you to have the social media following. They still want you to do events. All of those things. As a matter of fact, I think some of them, if you don't have those things in place, won't look at you as positively as someone who does.
Right, and there are many publishers who won't even touch you until you have especially on nonfiction, as I understand it, until you at least have a pretty good following, a platform of people who believe that you're already a subject matter expert on what you're talking about. So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And it's really hard to do.
Right.
I mean, everybody says, well, you got your family and friends. Well, I look at my kids who are teenagers.
Yeah.
And they don't have Facebook, of course, because, we're on it. But,
and we're ancient.
Right.
Get me the damn TV remote.
But they have, hundreds, sometimes thousands of friends on different platforms. And I don't,
Yeah.
And it is kind of difficult to get that. And I found one of the most difficult things to do in this whole process really is, and it's something beyond my control as a writer, is to get people to do reviews.
Yeah.
And reviews are ridiculously important.
Hugely important. And all of my friends who are authors and a couple who are agents continuously emphasize, look, if you love Roe's books, and I'll say this now, if you love his books, if you read his books, give him a review on Amazon. It's instrumental to getting traction on these things. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even care if it's a good review.
Right.
Honestly.
Bad press, good press. It's press.
I think a couple of non-5-star reviews actually add to the credibility of the whole review pile,
Right.
Because in the indie world, most even indie authors kind of look at reviews and say, okay, your first 10 are friends and family.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. There's a great Al Madrigal joke he has about opening a restaurant, and he says, you gotta go do this thing, or he's gonna get back on social media and go, hey, I just opened a new wood fire pizza place. If you don't want me sleeping on your couch again, you better get to yelping. So I mean, it's exactly what you're talking about. And so those first friends and family file in. But yeah, that cross section of reviews is hugely important because we do all kind of go, well, that's a corporate review, and that's from some click link shop in Singapore or something like that, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I understand completely. So in this process as a young man and coming up as an adult, what were you digging on? What were some of the you're writing fantasy, but what were your influences here? What were you looking at?
I read mostly fantasy too. I mean, obviously,
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Tolkien,
Yep.
the Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. I've actually plowed my way through the Silmarillion at one point in my life.
Yeah.
David Eddings, Raymond Feist, that kind of stuff.
Robert Jordan?
So, a little bit, not a lot.
Yeah, he's a little heavy for me. Gene
Who
Wolfe?
wrote the Thomas Covenant Chronicles.
Okay.
I forget who wrote that, but I've read that a couple of times.
Mhm.
So that kind of stuff. And every now and then I'll dip my turn page finger into something a little bit more on the classic line. The last couple of years, I've read a couple of old Mark Twain books and things like that. And if you've never read Mark Twain, you really need to.
He's a great writer.
It's funny.
He's great. I think he was incredibly more talented than people gave him credit for, and he gets a lot of credit. But I mean, at every turn, I see instances where Mark Twain is just like, wow, that dude's just a polyglot. He's unbelievable. So, in between reading Tolkien and doing other things, what were you doing to get your creative Jones on aside from putting comics in the box? I mean, there had to be some kind of outlet, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I've never.
Now I'm frightened as to what that outlet might have been if it wasn't creative.
I've never considered.
Well, you have kids, so I mean, that's a good outlet. That's a good outlet.
We've got 6 cats.
Oh, well, that's only 3 more than I have, and I hate 2 of them. So no, I don't hate them. Just to be clear, they are annoying, but
we moved all the time, man. This place here, this is the first time I've been anywhere more than 36 months at a time.
It is. Because you were, I think, in Vermont before that, right? Or where were you before that?
Oh man,
you were in Norwich for a while. I remember that, and I
was in Texas for a couple of years.
Texas,
and I was
okay.
Before that, and Virginia before that.
But you're settled, and I think that is a key to sort of putting an anchor on. Okay, I'm going to write. You forecast 9 books to the 30 Stone Saga. If I read everything correctly, I seriously thought you were going to do 30 books, but no problem there.
If I could go change that name, I would, man. Everybody says that. I go to shows and stuff, and they go, "Are you really going to do 30 books?" Like, God, I hope not.
So 3 1/3 stones per book, and but anyway, you're settled. You have a place. When we got here, it was kind of similar. Okay, great. Now I can sit and do production on Vorpal number 4, and knock it out. So I totally get that. So being settled does make a difference then.
Yeah, I mean it does. I think also just kind of getting a little older and kind of getting your kind of mental shit together and figuring out, what you're trying to accomplish is probably a good thing. And I think it helps writing having a little bit more foundation to kind of build off from.
Right. And before
Yep.
And before I sat back to the, when you hit the master's class and got writing, you talk about that, and it's baffling how much time becomes such an amazing commodity, and how when you say, I'm going to sit and write for 2 hours, which I'll ask you about that a little bit later, but that's important to you. That matters. And it's not just, I'm going to go write. It's not on a lark. I mean, those kinds of experiences matter now, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, time is. I'm not one of these people. Some people can sit down and say, okay, I've got 15 extra minutes. I'm going to sit down and write for 15
Yeah,
minutes.
right.
If I don't have at least a couple hours ahead of me, I can't do it. I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, I found that I can't write like in the morning. Really, my sweet spot is like 7 at night to like 3 in the morning. If I try to do anything creative, I mean that's an exaggeration, but generally, if I try to do anything creative from like 9 in the morning till 7 at night, it's just I look at it and go, this is awful. Work aside, I mean, I do some creative stuff at work, and I think that's a different sweet spot. But I mean, in terms of sort of exercising, the comic Jones or the art Jones or some of the other things, my sweet spot is late at night. So you said you did.
That late?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. What?
Do you really stay up that late?
No, I've been sick the last couple nights though. Like the night before, I had a health issue, which I won't get into on the air. It was graphic, but it sort of fixed itself before I went to work in the morning. But then last night I drank some milk before bed, and I'm usually good with that, but I think I drank too much, and well, that kept me up all night too. So, but usually I stay up till like 11 or midnight, get up about 5. I used to stay up till like 2 when I was younger, and just do crazy shit and draw and all that other stuff. I can't do that anymore. 11 noon is about, or 11 to midnight's about my limit.
I think about the time I used to keep when I was in my 20s, man, and I can't
shit.
Even I'd tell you the story. At OTS,
right.
I had a roommate.
I'm sorry, that's officer training school, folks, if you don't know.
Right, sorry. My roommate was a prior Army guy named Bill Conley, who's actually, I think he's a colonel now. He's still in the service.
Mm-hmm.
And we were roommates, and lights out was 10 o'clock. But, it was always kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge lights out, right? Because you take out your flashlight and do what you needed to do. So he was always like, man, we got to, shine our shoes and get all this. Like, dude, It's 10 o'clock. I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
I need my sleep. And if it's between messy shoes and sleep, I'm taking sleep every time.
Yeah. Yeah. The more I hear lately, the more I just hear sleep is hugely important. And then I heard a couple of reports yesterday that's like, if you don't sleep well, you're going to kill your heart. And so, I'm just thinking between what we did staying up early or late as we did as young people, heart's probably got about 10,000, 20,000 more beats left on it. So you said the master's program helped you finish the first third of the book. So did you walk into class with I've already got 100 pieces of notes, just help me figure out where to go with this? Or did you kind of say, okay, this, I'll suck in the knowledge, go home, and then work it from there? Or was the intent to sort of take what you had and form it there? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Well, going through, you're doing different kind of writing assignments, and eventually you get to a point, it's like, okay, you have to do your final project type of thing, which should result in something of some length.
Right.
And so I had a couple things lying around, racketing around inside my head, and I said, I got to pick one that I wanted to use, and this was the one I chose. And so, you throw out a first chapter or something to the group, and they would give you feedback, and it changed significantly from that feedback. And the nice thing about a program like that is after you've been in a class with people for about a year, they don't mind giving you good feedback.
Candid feedback, right?
Right, and the instructors gave you good feedback too. People are going to blow smoke up your ass and say, "Oh, this was really good."
Right?
They're like, "Oh, dude, man, you totally missed this, and I don't know what the hell you're talking about here," and et cetera, et cetera.
I love that. I love that so much when people can just be candid with you, and just say, "Look, this sucks ass so hard it makes a noise." I mean, this is Gordon Ramsay's suck here. Him laying the suck on you rather. And I love that. I love when people do that for me. And when I send out Vorpal, I'm sending out Vorpal for beta on Monday. When I send it out for beta, I'm like, be candid. And I know a lot of these people. I've been, Yvonne, you and I know as a mutual friend. I'm sure she'll want a beta and a couple of others. But I want candid feedback. This doesn't make any sense, especially if you've read the issues. So I'm glad that happened for you, because the more candid and the less of a tie you have, exactly right, the better that hammer is going to hit the anvil and the harder it's going to shape it into what you need it to.
And that is really important. But I will say it's really nice when you see somebody that's read your book and they just loved it.
Yeah.
Or at least they say they did.
Yeah.
I had to deliver a couple of copies. I was at a show here in Blacksburg, and I ran out of a book. So I said, look, here, I'll cut you a deal on this. I'll bring them to you when I get them in. And I brought them to her, and she had downloaded the first one and read it And when I brought her all 3 of them, I thought she was going to hug me.
Aw.
And, oh my God, it was awesome! I've been waiting for this. It's like that. That's a really good feeling.
That's really nice. Yeah.
That gives you the punch you need to kind of say, okay, I want to keep pressing on with the next one now.
That, and when you have hammered that thing onto the anvil over and over 4 or 5 times, and somebody reads it and goes, "Yeah, this is good. That's a great feeling," because then you know there's still candor there, but they're saying, "Yep, you've got it. You've got the the words in the right place and all these other things." I liked one of your quotes that I picked up right before I read in the interview. It said, "If airplane mechanics had the same self-doubt that writers have, and if they had to change their work as often, you never step foot on an airplane ever." And that self-doubt thing is pretty important. How much of that have you encountered since you started the 30 Stones saga?
Self-doubt?
Yeah.
Oh, every time you sit down and start typing, you're questioning yourself and kind of going, is this really, does this work?
Right.
Does this work?
Right.
What the hell am I? And generally what I do is when I sit down, I'll be able to bang out about a chapter, maybe 2 sometimes, anywhere from about 1,000 to 3,000 words when I sit down.
Yeah.
And what I'll generally do is I'll sit down and I'll reread the last thing I read the previous time and kind of make some notes and then start writing.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to chapter 1 of book 4, the one I'm working on now, and reread it. And I was honestly a little surprised. I kind of went, oh, I actually like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a new kind of thing for me because you always read it. Yeah, all right. But so it gets better with time.
Do you get imposter syndrome?
Oh, like who am I to be doing this?
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you really?
I mean, a little bit. I don't think I've sold enough yet to get that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
There's a something about being an indie that keeps you grounded like that because you're not paying bills really. At this point, it's a not too expensive hobby.
Yeah, and that's it, right? It is one of those things where you can. I've really had to take that attitude lately with the comic. Is just I'm producing these last 2 issues. 3 is ready to launch. I'm doing the last edits, and as I mentioned, the beta now. But I'm doing this last one so I can capitalize on that dream as a 14-year-old I had of being in the comics industry and doing comics, right? And now that you have sort of a retirement income and you're doing other things, you can go, yeah, you're right, this is an aside. I worked with a guy at the Marshall Center in Germany, and he wrote, he was a professor, he was great, really good guy, former CIA agent, and he wrote a Bavarian murder mystery. And I asked him, I said, what's your routine? He says, look, I go home every night, and he usually got home about 6, 7, and he says, I always found time to wedge, like from 8 to 10 or 9 to 11. I always wrote 2 hours, and at the end of that, I realized I had a book, and somebody encouraged me to publicize it. So, I think all of those things can creep in. Do you have a set ritual for writing? I mean, do you have look, kids, 9 to 11, the door's shut. If any of you bother me, I'm going to disintegrate your molecules, or how does that work?
I did for books 2 and 3.
Okay.
I went from 1 right into 2, right into 3. And basically I'd get home, and in the hour or 2 that I would watch TV or whatever before dinner, because my wife's European, so we eat late, I would just write. So basically I gave up my TV time.
Oh, okay.
And then I did the dumbest thing ever.
Uh-oh.
Is after book 3 came out, I said, I'm going to take a couple of months off and do nothing.
I read that too on your blog. You said, yeah, I'm going to take a break.
That was such a bad idea. Because it's really difficult to kind of get back into that, writing every day. Cause,
were the ideas still flowing for you? Did you already have some sort of capital things, and you sort of forced yourself to go into that, or what?
No, I mean, book 1, I knew where I was starting and I knew where I was ending, and I made it up as I went along.
Yep,
right?
Yep. That's Vorpal. Yep.
So, and then the sword thing kind of presented itself as I was working my way through the end of book 1, and said, okay, I can do something with this book 2, and that sword is going to actually be really important throughout most of the series.
Yeah.
So books 2 and 3 just really kind of flowed pretty naturally, and then I took that break. In book 4, it's like,
Yeah, you said you said taking time off from writing is like taking time off from exercising. It's difficult to get back into a groove and reclaim the time you've given over to other things. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think I've gone through edits on the script for book 4 probably 6 times now, and I'm still not to a point where I've probably got 8 solid pages of the 29 or 30 that I need. So I understand. If you don't move that muscle, man, it hurts. But you think you're going to get book 4 done by Christmas, yeah?
No.
Oh, okay.
I would like to, but it's to have the way the publishing cycle works.
Yeah.
Is let me tell you how I do it. So after all my internal edits are done, and there's a process to that, then I put it on Amazon. I order an author copy. I read through that, mark it up, go through, make all those corrections, go through it again,
Right.
and then I put it up, and it's available a couple days later. But from that first time you do it, right, you send it in, it's going to take a week or two to get your author copy. And then, another week or so to go through it all and make all those corrections.
Right.
So you have to have it done probably 6 to 8 weeks before you actually want it published. I do.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
So yeah, I don't see Christmas happening.
Well, that seems fair. You've got a lot to do, and you did take that break.
But I look at what you do, Jason, and I go, man, at least I don't have to worry about, inks and colors and sketches and storyboards and all that. That would drive me insane.
Blessed is maybe a word. I was fortunate when I decided to take a team for Team 3, when the team basically nailed everything that was inside my head, which is spooky, number one, and number two, joyous, because when I handed the script over to the artist didn't speak English. Diego Albuquerque, he's in Brazil, and at the time, his wife of the time, he's went through some changes, but his wife of the time spoke English, and so what she would do is she would just translate the pages, and she would say, okay, he wants this, this, and this, and then he would come back and say, is this what you want? And then show me pencils, and I go, fuck, that was what was in my head. How did that happen? I mean, seriously, it was bizarre. So I was fortunate in that not only on the artist side, because he did pencils and inks, but on the color side with Mike Montalvo, Mike hit home runs with the colors as well, and even talked to me a little bit about, I think you meant to do this rather than this. So I was in heaven because it was also a tremendous collaboration, and I love a good collaboration in these instances. So yes, couldn't agree with you more. I'm fortunate in that regard with Vorpal. And I think it's a different discipline because I've written a couple of novels. I've written 3 novels that are currently collecting dust, and the hardest part to me of novels, maybe it isn't for you, you could talk about that, is edits. That, write drunk, edit sober, right? So you've got to go through and then you got to tweak all the nuts and tie down the bolts, and so I have novels that are sitting until I get these comics done. I don't know about you, but yeah, I was fortunate in that regard, and edits are always the hardest part. Is that the most difficult phase for you?
Edits are probably the most timely part. I mean, I benefit a lot from when I joined the Air Force as a journalist. I had a guy who was A1C I worked for at the time, Airman First Class E3, and we published on a Thursday.
Right.
And one Thursday morning, he said to me, "We need a 2-page spread on this thing here. Go get that done."
Yeah.
It's like, okay, when do we need it for? He says, "Well, we're going to the publisher at 1.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you want me to take photos, do an interview, write a story, and get it all done in the next 3 hours? He's like, "Yeah, you probably need to go now."
Yep.
So that was actually super beneficial because it helps you I learned to write, kind of organize it in my head.
Exactly. Right.
And then write it.
That's so true. And it's hard to communicate that to people, what that skill that we acquired, even as you're writing it. And it also, I think, Ro, in the editing process, helps you not dwell on certain things. Puppy for Small Dog. I, Keith Hugh, others throughout our careers and our lives have literally assaulted pages for the right word for that instance to fit in that paragraph. And when we write fiction, I mean, there's some differences, of course, but it does make it a hell of a lot easier, in the edit process versus someone who may dwell on, is that the right color blue? Right. Is it azure? Is it turquoise? Is it aquamarine? What, pick one. It is what it is. It's a binary state. So couldn't agree with you more. That skill is incredibly important.
Microsoft Word has this wonderful feature called Add Comment.
Yes.
And so whenever I'm writing something and I realize that's not quite what I want,
Yeah.
I just right click and add a comment and say, go back and find whatever.
Yeah.
And part of my editing process, and I also highlight things, is after I'm done, when I type the end, I go back into all my highlights and I do whatever I need to do with those. And then I take every one of those comments that I have over those 100,000 words and fix every comment. And sometimes the comment might require going through the entire book and fixing a continuity thing or moving things, whatever it is.
Like changing someone's name from chapter to chapter. That's one of my notorious ones.
Right.
His name was Damon in the first chapter. Now his name is Chuck. I'm like, I need to fix that.
In book 1, I had that very thing. I had named a town something in one chapter and then something different in another chapter.
I think that's very much an author thing for sure. We've got about 10 more minutes, Ro. Tell me a little bit, what, from the Gray to Reckoning, what's improved? How have you evolved as an author from the first book to now?
Writing Reckoning, I actually kind of said that to my wife. I said, I actually feel like it's coming out better now.
Yeah.
It like practice, anything you do, you keep practicing, you get better at it.
Right.
And writing's a perishable skill, which is why I hated taking that 2 months off in retrospect. I think just kind of having the plot kind of thing work and transitions, nice smooth transitions are, like in music, are hugely important to kind of get you from one place to the next without feeling real clunky. But I think, just the kind of overall tone of it is smoother.
Are you proud of your work?
Yeah, I mean, after the first book, I was kind of like, well, I'm proud that I had done it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, I'm more proud of the work itself.
Mm-hmm.
Book 4 is a little bit of it's still the same story, but it's different people because there's a bit of a jump. But I did exactly what I wanted to do in book 3.
Right.
And so now I just kind of have to figure out how to make that carry through.
What, for you, is the most difficult challenge as an indie author, not in the writing phase? You've got books. Now you obviously, to me, the most challenging phase after the writing part is connecting them to readers. We know there are readers out there, and publishing houses spend millions of dollars on James Patterson's and others, and it's that middle sort of distribution ground and finding the right audience, and as you said, the Amazon reviews and those kinds of things. And we've talked before offline about, when we were talking about doing shows and some other things. But what to you is the biggest uphill climb to getting a book to a reader?
The amount of learning that you have to do about the marketing thing.
Yeah.
You can spend all of your time not writing and just watching, YouTube channels and podcasts and all that about the marketing aspect of it.
Right.
And then once you do kind of figure out a little bit of it, then you have to go out and find those shows, right? And you have to find shows that are within your budget and within your reach. So anything outside of a few hour journey away involves a hotel stay, right?
Right.
I was looking at an event happening in Roanoke next month, and it's a 3-day event, which are always nice.
Yeah.
But the table price was like $750.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's like, man, that's like 150 books just to break even.
Yeah.
Yeah. So probably not.
It's similar. It's similar with big comic conventions. The tables are exasperatingly high. I've done small conventions. I've done a few mid conventions, and I always sell all my books, which is wonderful. I'm very appreciative of that. But I always think if I'm going to pay, like you said, $750 a table, I don't think I could sell enough books. I'm going to have to print some T-shirts, or I'm going to have to, have some kind of dorky, hey, contribute more so I can pay for my table or something like that. But it's not that I don't have faith in myself. I do. It's that I don't. When we talked earlier about the whole hobby versus profession thing, at that point, which way is the meter swinging? Does $700 coming out of my family's budget right then really pertain to this hobby that I have, or am I gonna, sort of hit the switch and become a professional whatever? And to me, that answer has always been unanswered. I mean, we always hope for the brass ring, and somebody discovers us, so to speak, and that's great. And maybe there's a producer who will pick up the Gray or the sort of Wilmerman, and will say this is a Netflix series. We always want that sort of thing, but when you're confronted with $750 for a table, that's a whole nother story.
Right. Comic book conventions, I'm really lucky. Anybody who writes fantasy is
Yes.
really lucky. Because, and I ask people who walk by my table at comic shows, do you read fantasy?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Overwhelmingly
the answer
so,
is
right.
always yes.
So far, you're it.
Right. So and they're paying money to get into the show, which
Right.
means they want to spend money at the show.
Yep.
So comic book shows are tremendous.
Yeah,
I haven't done my best there that I've done at other things.
Mm-hmm.
But if I could just add real quick, being an independent author, there are people out there, and more than you would think, who will support you simply because you're an independent local author. I've had people at various events around here say, where are you from? And I'll say, I'm from, here. And they'll say, oh, right, yeah, I'll buy a book.
Yep. And I think it always helps if you can tell your story. Listen, I was in the military for a great amount of time. I put this off because it just wasn't the right thing to do. Now I'm doing this, and I've created these comic books, and they're about this female assassin, and I wanted to get them out there and tell this story, and that's why I'm here today. Well, that's great. I'll spend $5 on your comic. That really does work. I couldn't agree with you more. If you can tell folks your story, it is an incredible social lubricant to get them involved in your process and buying your books and things like that. So let's wrap up on two questions. The first question is a three-parter. Give listeners a piece of advice, first on writing, second on marketing, and third, just on doing this as an independent author. What's the one sort of key to keep it all together?
On writing, just write. I know people even now, they have ideas about books and they want to do it, but they kind of get sidetracked with other things. And I think there's almost like a fear of failure, fear of success kind of thing, where if they can put it off, then they still want to be a writer, but they don't actually have to do it.
Yeah.
Just write. Even if it's no good, just write it and see what it is, and then you can make the changes from there.
Okay.
Marketing, don't fall down the rabbit hole. You're going to have to find and learn a couple of things.
That's great advice.
But there are 1,000 things. It's like using Photoshop, right?
Yeah.
Photoshop will do a million things.
Yes.
You need to learn about 6 of them.
Like in our old newspaper days, there may be 46 fonts loaded on the computer. You don't need to use all 46 of them for headlines.
Right. You need 2.
You need 3 maybe.
Right. So just find those couple of things and try them out and see if they work.
Right.
And and if they do, keep doing those things, and then slowly add to that kind of quiver. On writing as an indie, don't be afraid to do it. It's set up now. Everything, people have done it. There are people making a good living off doing it.
Yes.
It just takes time, and the thing is, I sat here a while ago going, oh my God, where is this going? And then I thought, I've only been doing this for a year.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to do it for a while.
Right.
And you've got to have, I think it's important to have a back catalog. So one book isn't going to do it.
No.
People are starting to read in the same way they take in movies and things like that. They want to binge watch, right? They don't want to wait 2 years for the next book.
That's right.
They want to know that you're good for 2 to 3 books a year and that you're going to keep them coming. And once you have 2 or 3 books, I didn't do a show until I had right before my 3rd book came out.
Okay.
And once people see that, then they will keep coming back.
Right. All right, final question, because I have to ask. My favorite TV show of all time is Inspector Morse. I'm sure you are familiar with this show.
I'm actually not.
Okay, so Inspector Morse is kind of British Columbo, and he is he was a cantankerous old detective played by a very famous British actor named John Thaw. And but he was a very good detective, and the backstory is he went to Oxford for a little while, and then you don't know why he stopped going to Oxford, but then he became a copper in that area, so he has ties to Oxford, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, whenever he introduces himself, he always introduces himself as either Morse or Inspector Morse. You never hear what his first name is. And it's not until the 6th or 7th season at that time when his boss, played by a guy named, I think his name is James Blunt, but I can't think of his screen name. Anyway, it's the chief inspector of them all. He suddenly goes, "Oh, Endeavor, knock it off." And Morse flips the fuck out because no one ever calls him by his first name, which is Endeavor, spelled with a U, and O-U-R. And, there's this amazing backstory on his parents named him after, I think they were Quakers, and they named it after this boat that they were on or something like that. But so it's an interesting. So that leads me to the question. You have I don't want to say unusual, a unique first name, Rosaire. I think people would be interested to know how your parents arrived at Rosaire.
I am the youngest of 7 children. 6
Wow,
boys.
7.
All the good names were taken.
So no John or Mark for you.
Now, my brothers are like Dave, Steve, Tim, Jim.
Are they really?
Oh, yeah.
So
I was obviously going to be the last one.
Yeah.
And Rosaire is my father's name.
Oh, okay.
And my middle name is my mother's father's name.
Which is?
So it's my middle name. And
we're not disclosing that.
We're not.
Do you know Stefan Alford?
Yeah.
So we had a debate about his middle name today, and he would not disclose his first middle name, but I discovered it because he gave me a hint. And but I'm not allowed to reveal it. I've sworn it to secrecy, so that's fair.
No,
I understand.
I tell you what.
All right, that's fair. Well, I was curious, and I appreciate that you gave us some insight. I wasn't sure if there was some sort of in the catacombs of the Vatican, the second tome from the right, my grandparents, or something like that. But that's also
it's a family name, and oddly enough, I do know several other Rosaires. I mean, several of them are related to me, but a girl I went to high school with married a guy who I've never met named Rosaire. And it's Rosie's Beef Jerky. You can look that up online.
I'm looking it up as soon as we're done, actually. Yeah, that's great.
He sells beef jerky. It's really good. You should go online and check him out. But yeah, another Rosaire. And so I gave it to my son as one of his middle names as well.
Fantastic. That is great. Well, listen, this has been one of the more enjoyable interviews I've ever done. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. His name is Rosaire. His name is Rosaire Bushey. It's the 30 Stone Saga. He has a site, rosairebushey.com. The books are Magic's Genesis the Grey, Magic's Genesis sort of Wilmaman, and Magic's Genesis Reckoning. And the one that will be coming soon is Magic's Genesis, and I'm sorry I don't remember that title.
The Magic's Genesis part isn't going to be on there anymore.
Oh, okay.
I think the working title I'm using right now is Red Priest Rising.
Red Priest Rising, that's what it was. I caught that in the blog. I couldn't remember it. Anyway, I encourage you to buy all of his books twice, and when you do, be sure you review them on Amazon, Goodreads, and all those good places, because, folks, I can't emphasize enough, as an independent writer and artist, those are the kinds of things that give us traction and help us build audience and those kinds of things. So buy Ro's books, give them reviews, and do all that. Thanks for being on with me, Ro, and doing the interview. I appreciate it. Rosaire Bushey, everyone. As we come out of the recorded piece of the interview and go back to our live broadcast, we realize we are running over our usual time, but we will get to the usual 3 reviews that we have for you this week. Again, thanks to Ro for coming on. Great interview, and if you haven't bought his books, please do so. They are available on Amazon right now, and if you buy them, leave them a review. It really is the best thing you can do for independent authors. Help them get traction, help them increase sales. All right, let's talk about our 3 comics for review. If you're watching at home, they are appearing on the screen. They are this week. I will label them to you now. Spectacular Spider-Man number 145, published in 1988. Sergio Aragonese Gru the Wanderer number 39, published in 1988. And City of Heroes number 2 from Image Comics, that was published in 2005. Where are my notes? Here are my notes. So let's start with Spider-Man. And earlier in the show, I talked to you a little bit about how if Marvel/Disney decide to Disney-fy or sort of look at the big takeover of comics, we can expect a change in how stories are related and how I think everything in comics will go towards suiting the bigger brand, but let's leave that aside for a moment. This is a unique story. This is a story of Spider-Man fighting with foe Boomerang, and it's over a yacht race. So let that one sink in a minute. Spider-Man trying to uncover the cheats behind a yacht race, and he ends up out in the ocean, chained up, being dragged behind the boat. He eventually frees himself and captures both Boomerang and the person who was trying to fix the yacht race as well. The art is great. The art is by Sal Buscema. Jerry Conway wrote the script, so some old school in here. Tom DeFalco was the editor-in-chief. This was a December 1988 issue, so that was, what was I doing? I was in New York freezing my ass off. That's what I was doing. Wakes up Peter Parker, if you're looking on the screen. There's Peter Parker waking up. Great crisp artwork. Still in the four-color era of comics, starting to transition into the more colorful era of comics. Nice, crisp line art, easily read panels, 6-panel pages, a couple of 4-panel pages when the action comes on. Great Spider-Man looks the whole way through. A great issue. It's a lot of fun, especially Boomerang is a really fascinating villain. It's probably worth more than $1. I mean, again, the artwork itself is pretty good. Plot's kind of funky and good, but again, it doesn't always have to be saving the world. You know, saving the world from a bad boat race is also acceptable. So why not? So I like Spectacular Spider-Man 145. I would add it to my collection. Well, I have it in my collection. It's in my dollar box, of course. I'd say one of the funnier things in this, let me see, was it this one? Let me see. Is it the Airwolf ad? I think it's the Airwolf ad. Yeah, there it is. Airwolf, real engine-powered model helicopter you can fly, from Cox Hobbies, which was one of my favorite hobby companies. Here, I'll back it up. There we go. Not as blurry. Now blurry, not as blurry. One of my favorite hobby companies. My stepfather and I used to fly gas-powered helicopters all the time. When I was on Midway Island when I was 6, we had a gas-powered helicopter, and we fired it up. And it was on a string, so you could have it go up and down and do all these things. But my stepdad had the string, and it basically just got up, and it flew out into the Pacific, never to be heard from again. It was pretty awesome. Anyway, pretty good issue. I recommend picking it up as review goes. Again, the color's great. The artwork's really nice and crisp, and some of the expressions that he does for Boomerang and some of the action shots are fantastic, too. Recommend Spider-Man 145, be worth more than $1. City of Heroes 2, I don't want to dwell too much on, but I did bring up earlier trying to replay Champions number 2, which was meh. They tried to, Image and Top Cow tried to capitalize on the City of Heroes thing, especially when it spilled over to City of Villains. Tried to build comics on that. Didn't go so well for them. I didn't really care for the comics that much. I thought they were a little heavy-handed. Thought they were well drawn. This one was by, let's see, Mark Waid was the writer, David Nakayama was the penciler, Rick wow, I'm really getting old. Basiloa was the inker, the colorist was Sonia Obak, Chaz Riggs did the design, and Troy Pateri did the lettering. Again, it's a little heavy-handed. Mark Silvestri was the editor back then. There's a great ad for a Seth Green comic in the front as well. But it's a little heavy-handed. The characters are kind of generic, and you don't really have a stake in them. I mean, Statesman was one of the characters from City of Heroes, and you kind of sort of know who he is, but not really. Yeah, it's okay. It probably still needs to be in the dollar box, but I mean, I don't know that that's not a fault of any video game or comic or offshoot product of a video game. That happens. Video games are tough products to make into sort of collectible things. So I like the cover though. I like the Archer sort of cover that's on there. That's pretty cool. There's that allergies again. Sorry, I sniffled on you. I should have hit the mute button here. Take a good one. There you go. I loved Gru the Wanderer. My friend Ted Clark introduced me to Gru the Wanderer way back when. Sergio Aragonese drawing Gru. Of course, Sergio Aragonese came from Mad Magazine, and then he created this character called Gru the Wanderer, who is incredibly humorous. Again, this is May 1988, which I was still in Plattsburgh. I think we were going through Plattsburgh, New York, going through the 2 weeks of summer back then, right around there. Maybe that was the 1.5 weeks of spring. Anyway, what I always liked about Aragonese is the life that he breathed into his art and the freshness, and I wish I could show this to you on the audio podcast, but on the video you can see this double-page spread, and it is just incredible. I want to walk into that world and hang out with some of those people, especially some of the more scantily clad ones. Anyway, he drew scantily clad well, I got to say that. But I mean, the worlds are rich, and I mean, they're just beautiful. It's great, and Gru the Wanderer is a fun character. In this issue, he's going to look for a dog, and you think it's his dog. So you can see on the cover, there's a dog on the cover. The key to the dog, though, is the necklace that he is wearing around his neck, which is worth a shit ton of money. But Gru doesn't know that he likes the dog, so he in turn sells himself to be a person who helps people across the river. He actually carries people on his back. It's kind of funny, and some other things. Any Gru is worth more than $1 in my opinion, and shouldn't be in the dollar box. This is a nice sweet spot for Marvel Comics, I think, in this period. They were doing more things like Gru the Wanderer and taking more shots. This was printed on its Epic Comics label with the little E below the old Marvel box. And I really liked the title. I really thought it was great. So I like this title a lot. If you get a chance to read any Gru comic, do so. Even if you're new school, you're picking up comics for the first time, Gru is one to fall back on. And the artwork is just sensational. The colors in this one are great too. But Sergio Aragonese, master at this, and it's just great stuff. So I know I blew through those 3 comics pretty quickly, but I don't like this thing to go more than an hour. So that said, we're done, and it's time to wrap up this podcast for this week. The podcast, as I mentioned to you, is brought by Crazy Monkey Inc. You can visit them online at Facebook and on Instagram. Just search for Crazy Monkey Inc. You'll find a store on Facebook where you can get all of the titles. If you can't find them there, go to indieplanet.us. You can find all the Crazy Monkey Inc. titles there, including my title, which you know as Vorpal numbers 1 and 2, which I've put back up on the screen for you. Vorpal number 3 is coming very soon. The beta copy will go out on Monday to those who have volunteered their time. Thank you very much. And we should see something, I'm hoping, around Christmas time, maybe Thanksgiving time. Do look for on indieplanet.us a free Vorpal weekend over the Thanksgiving Day weekend. I'll be working that with Crazy Monkey Inc. So you can download the e-copies for free. I'll have more on that in the future. Again, Crazy Monkey Inc. is your stop. Don't forget my website, jasontudor.com, which is Atomic Bazooka Studios, which produces this podcast, the comics, the Angry John Rants comic, which is on a bit of a hiatus until I think next Thursday is what I said. I should have a couple new issues done. There's a ziplining plot that's going on right now. Just been a lot going on. Haven't been able to get that done. And much, much more children's books and so much more. Atomic Bazooka Studios at jasontudor.com. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast this week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.